Welcome in Monday Live. I am Jason Priester of allclemsontigers.com, part of the Clemson Maven multimedia platform. Joining you today on the 89th birthday of Ipte. Welcome in. Before we get started, as usual, remind everybody to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. We would very much appreciate it. Appreciate everybody that subscribed during the show last week. Helped us to get over 1,000. Did some giveaways. Brody Chase, John Sarian, the Clemson dude, all winners. John Brody, y'all reach out to me or Zach or somebody. We'll get you y'all swag too. The dude has already received his. Fall camp is over, and the preparation for Duke has begun. Heard from Clemson quarterback Cade Klubnik today. And I'm telling you, man, every time you hear these players talk to the media, you just have to feel a little bit better about the way you feel about this Clemson team as they get set to kick off the season 2 weeks from tonight in Durham against Duke. There is just a confidence level, and you can hear it in the way they talk. Not that I felt since I have been on the Clemson beat. I started doing this in 2020, the COVID season, so I wasn't around it then. It was all done by, Zoom calls and stuff, so we didn't actually get to experience it in person. So I've done it the past 3 years in person, and there's just a different vibe around these guys, man. You hear them talking about national championships, and that's not something we hear Clemson players and coaches talk about in the past. We heard R.J. Mickens mentioning national championship today. We heard Dabo Swinney broach the subject, when we had Clemson's media day. I think it was ahead of fall camp. And in between there have been several players, mentioning winning national titles. It's kind of refreshing. Winning a national championship is not one of the team's stated goals. I mean, that's been pretty well publicized. The goals are win the opener, win the division, win the state championship, win the conference championship, win the closer. And, if you do all those things, chances are pretty good you're going to be in the playoff potentially playing for a national title. But it seems like they're taking a different approach this year. And for me, I think that all starts at the top, kind of trickles its way down. I don't think you hear players talking this way if the coaches aren't talking this way behind the scenes, including Dabo Swinney. I remember one of the first things he said about this team was they have the potential to be great. I can't remember if he said great or special. It was one of those two words, and it was all up to them or something like that. And I'm starting to believe that the more we listen to some of these guys talk, listening to Cullen talk today and talk some of those receivers up, keep those guys healthy. I think you got some playmakers there. You start getting dinged with injuries, you might find yourself in some trouble. But if you keep guys like Bo Collins and Adam Randall and Antonio Williams healthy, it allows you to kind of bring those younger guys along at the pace you want to bring them along, not force them into starting roles before they're really ready. And I think the potential of this offense is extremely high. Extremely high. Loved everything. Again, I talked about it last week. Loved everything I saw out of Cade Klubnik in the one practice I attended. Just in guys' faces when he thought they needed to bring more energy. And I think that's the kind of leadership that's been lacking at quarterback the past 2 seasons. That's not a knock on DJ. That's not the kind of guy he is. He's not that vocal, rah-rah guy. He's just not his personality. But I think it hurt not having that kind of guy. And I think that the rest of the team kind of feeds off that energy and that leadership. And I think that will bode well for this Tiger team as we move into the season. Hearing how well this offense performs or did perform in fall camp, and how challenging it was for the defense, I think helps the defense too. The last 2 years we've kind of heard how the defense owned the offense in spring and the fall camp, and that's not been the narrative this year. It's been very competitive by all accounts, kind of been back and forth. Something RJ Mickens talked about today, practicing against this offense has made this defense better. And I'm not sure that's been the case the past 2 years. And I don't think it's just because of the new quarterback. I think it's just all encompassing. The new offense, new offensive coordinator, new way of doing things on offense. I think it's bringing out the best in everybody. Looking ahead to that season opener at Duke, I did a video with Mark Rogers in the last week and talked about how I think some fans are kind of overlooking this Duke team and seeing, hey, it's Duke, we should go in there and punk these guys by 30. Don't get me wrong when I say that. I think Clemson goes in there and wins and probably wins by a couple of touchdowns. I just don't think they're going to go in there and win by 30, 40 points. I don't think this is your typical Duke team, and I don't think that's going to necessarily mean bad things are on the horizon for Clemson. I just have that much respect for this Duke team and what Mike Elko's done there in 1 year. And they bring back 18 starters. That is almost unheard of in this day and age. It's a lot of experience, and you listen to those guys talking in Charlotte a couple weeks ago at the KCC kickoff. They're very confident, man. That is a confident bunch. I think that is going to be a competitive football game, at least for the first half, first 3 quarters. I think Clemson's got more talent, and I think the talent wins in the end. They probably pull away in the second half and win by a couple scores. But if Clemson doesn't go in there and blow their doors off, I don't think it's time to start worrying, hit the panic button, or anything like that, man. Again, that's going to be a good Duke team. Probably one of the top 4 or 5 teams in the league, maybe even better than that. Also, remember, it's a season opener, new offense, a new quarterback, a relatively new quarterback. I know he started 2 games last year, but this is his first year as the guy. So it's a lot of new pieces. And when you're dealing with new pieces, sometimes there's an acclimation process. Things, it might not be clicking on all cylinders, from the opening whistle. Tickle Tiger says, do I think we come out conservative and build? I'm torn about hiding stuff, staying vanilla. I think the new offense need to give FSU stuff to look at. I think if you got a couple of cupcakes on the schedule to start the season, you can kind of hold back and be vanilla and not show your hand. But when you're opening on the road against a team that won 9 games last week, I don't think you can go in and say, hey, we're going to be conservative and hold back for FSU, who we play 4 weeks from now. I think that's how you get beat. I think you got to go in, willing to show your hand. Maybe if things go your way and you can build a comfortable lead, you can go conservative, but I don't think you can go in and say, hey, we're going to hold back, man, because it's Duke. And then, we play Florida Atlantic, Charleston Southern over the next 2 weeks. We don't have to show much. I don't think it's going to, I don't see that playing out that way. I think Duke's a better football team than that. If you go in there holding out on them, you're liable to find yourself in a dogfight. Not saying you have to show everything you got, but I don't think you can go in there with the simplest or most vanilla game plan and, just trying to save stuff for Florida State. Dean says these players are oozing with confidence, just need some good luck with being healthy. Yes, they absolutely is. They are due a little luck on the health side. I've talked about it before during those national title years and those 6 years of making the playoff. Clemson was pretty fortunate on the injury front. I'm not saying they never had any guys injured or missed time or anything, because they did, absolutely, but nothing like we've seen the past 2 years where they just kind of been ravaged by injury. Um, they absolutely can use a little luck in that regard. Um, you know, Again, going back and something Dabo Swinney said back, I think it was at Clemson Media Day a week or so before the open fall camp, right before the ACC kickoff, and he talked about the accountability with this team and how they keep accountability charts. And I think there were only 3 guys who were not where they wanted them to be or ahead of where they wanted them to be or whatever. And I want to say he said that was kind of maybe the best he's had so far, or if not one of the best. I can't remember exactly what he said now, but not, and to me, when you're talking about accountability and those things, I think part of that is doing what you need to from a health standpoint, nutritional standpoint, weight room standpoint, to everything you can to keep yourself in as best shape as possible to avoid the injury bug. So again, another aspect of having to like what you hear coming out of fall camp. Darian, John Sarian, one of our winners from last week. Hey man, reach out to me or Zach, and we'll send you some swag. I don't know if you heard it last week, but you were one of the winners that were picked. John says, sounds like the defensive backfield is more confident than they've been in a long time. Yeah, I think they are. It didn't help them the injuries didn't help them at the time last year that they suffered on the back end, but I think it's going to help them this year. Guys, as much as like Toriano Pride had to play so much last year, probably a lot more than he otherwise would have had everybody stayed healthy. That's only going to make him better this year. Um, you know, I think Nate Wiggins improved leaps and bounds over the course of the year last season. He's a guy who's NFL stock I could see skyrocket this year if he has this kind of season that some people think he's going to have. And they've got got experience you've got at safety with Phillips and Mickens and Makuba and Venables. I mean, if he can get not Venables, he's not going to be around this year. So scratch Venables, but still, Makuba, Phillips, Mickens. I mean, those guys have played a ton of football. And then you got some young guys in there that are very talented. I think the pass defense is going to be much improved. What was a weak link last year, I don't think it's going to be that weak link this year. I don't know. It just sounds like everything's kind of starting to gel on that side of the ball, and maybe we see a return to those Venables like defenses. Dude says, hopefully Phil Maffa gets a lot of carries this year. Another thing Dabo Swinney said last week that caught my ear, that if everything goes the way they hope, Maffa and Shipley's both going to have 1,000 yards. That kind of gives you a little insight into how they picture this offense. You hear Air Raid and Garrett Riley's name mentioned together, and some people just picture them slinging the ball all over the field 65, 70 times a game. That's not what that's not what this offense is gonna be. It's just got some air raid. It's just a variation of the air raid that still, is heavily reliant on the inside zone runs, which Clemson's been heavily reliant on in the past already. And I think, Shipley and Maffa are going to be big parts of the plan. Shipley is, you kind of have to wonder exactly how Maffa fits into the plan, but he was guarantee you that coaching staff gave him a pretty specific idea of how they envisioned him being used this year when it was sounding like he was thinking about transferring, and whatever they told him was enough to convince him to stay. So I think those carries are going to be divided up pretty evenly. I think you're going to see a two-headed monster at running back, maybe the best duo of running backs in the country. We'll see. John says the only troubling aspect of this year's college football playoff, a game may have to be played in the Sugar Bowl. There's some voodoo in that Superdome for Clemson. Yes, there is some evil voodoo in that Superdome for Clemson. Make no mistake, they have not had much good fortune in that building. That is for sure. It goes all the way back to 2017, isn't that where Alabama beat them in the semifinals? It just, for whatever reason, Clemson just has not been able to win there. Maybe they avoid that spot, though. Mike says, is FSU going to go conservative versus LSU in week 1? Nah, yeah, I don't think so either. It's one thing if you're opening up against Charleston Southern. It's a different thing altogether if you're opening up with a quality opponent. I just don't think you can hide too much, or I don't think you can go in planning to hide too much. It is what it is. Not saying you got to show your whole hand, but I don't think you can go in and say, hey, we're going to be ultra conservative and save this for a month later. Yeah, John, I thought you might have logged off before I announced the winners last week. So if you reach out to me or Zach, we'll get it to you, man. Reach out to me on Twitter or Zach on Twitter, or reach out to the All Clemson Twitter account. Can't wait to see what Coach Eason does with Woods and the depth Clemson has. Scary good. The depth inside, especially. They have so much depth on the interior of that defensive line. It's insane. It's hard to believe how much depth they've kind of stacked there, and it's kind of hard to do that in the era of the transfer portal. And they've been able to do it. You get Tyler Davis and Root back, and you got guys like, if you can get Trey Williams healthy. I know I'm gonna forget somebody, but the kind of depth Clemson has is kind of kept. We haven't even seen what a guy like DeMonte Capehart can really do yet, and we talking about a guy that was fairly highly touted coming out of high school, right down the road here in Hartsville. He's going, what is it, third year in the program now, and he's really not had an opportunity to showcase what he can do because of all that depth. And now you've brought in even more behind him with this last recruiting class with Peter Woods, Vic Burley, Stephon Green. Sounds like Burley might miss the Duke game. We'll see if he misses more than that. But Woods is going to play. He's going to play early, often, and a lot. He's just going to be hard to keep off the field. Not saying he's going to start, but he's going to play a lot. My only question about Woods is, I'm curious to see how often, or if at all, he gets lined up outside in it, because Clemson's not quite as deep there at end. You got Xavier Thomas, who has been banged up the past 2 or 3 years, has had no luck there. Got Justin Mascole, if I'm not mistaken, has no career sacks. And then behind them, you got a lot of inexperience. Cade Denoff, Zaire Patterson, and then some freshmen. TJ Parker, AJ Hoffler, David Ujimi. I think Parker's a guy that's going to help early, often. We'll see if Hoffler can get some early opportunities. I know when I saw him a couple weeks ago, he looks physically ready. But, being physically ready, mentally ready are two different things. And unlike Parker, Hoffer was not an early enrollee. From Christian, iron sharpens iron. It's nice to hear the defense being put on their toes from the new offensive play calling. Yeah, that has been one of the most refreshing things to hear coming out of this camp. For me, personally, anyways. Again, touched on it at the top. We've heard the past 2 years how the defense is ahead of the offense and kind of running things in fall camp, especially early. And that was not the case this year. Even going back to the first scrimmage, it was Dabo said it was competitive. I know somebody that was there. He said it was back and forth and competitive. Very encouraging signs. All encouraging signs. Tickled Tiger says Dabo put everyone on notice after Tennessee game. Replace Streeter. These coaches know it's time to step up. We still have a young staff. Yeah, there was a come to Jesus meeting. Make no mistake. There was a come to Jesus meeting with the coaching staff after the Orange Bowl. I've talked about it before. I think the program's kind of sitting at a crossroads, and I'm not one of these guys that hates hiring from within. If it's the right move, I'm okay with it. I didn't mind seeing Brandon Streeter promoted to offensive coordinator at the time because I remember what he did when he was at Richmond and Liberty. I mean, he was a pretty good play caller. 6 years of experience. It's not like he was new to the position. I do think, hindsight being what it is, I think he was kind of put in a bad spot with a stale, archaic offense and a quarterback who had so little confidence in himself that the first time something went wrong, it was going to snowball on him. Hindsight being what it is, Dabo probably should have made this move a year sooner. The offense needed to be revamped, and Streeter is not the guy to do that. You need to bring in somebody that's got their own that runs their own offense and can bring a fresh set of eyes to this thing, man, because it had gotten stale, and it had gotten stale going back to before Trevor Lawrence left. In my opinion, anyways. But yeah, there was definitely a come to Jesus meeting not long after the Orange Bowl. I can't remember if it was before Brandon Streeter was fired or after. I want to say it was before, but I've heard things got very heated in there, very heated. And yeah, I do think coaches were put on notice that, hey, I don't care if we've lost 3 games each of the past 2 years. This is still Clemson, and my expectations for this program are still, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think that was the message from Dabo Swinney, and him firing a guy like Brandon Streeter after just 1 year. That'll turn your head and raise some eyebrows pretty quick in that building. John says, hopefully we don't see endless wheel routes this year. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I remember when the announcement was made that Garrett Riley was the hire. Some of the first things you see is, man, I hope he does away with the bubble screens. I hope we don't have all these bubble screens. I know you're not talking about bubble screens. You're talking about wheel routes, but the bubble screens ain't going away. That's one thing that's going to still be a big part of the offense. And, it's just a matter of how they're executed. If you don't get the blocking on the perimeter, they're going to get blown up. Clemson's not been very good, when it comes to getting their wideouts out on the perimeter blocking in the past couple of years. We've talked about this many times. That's something receivers used to take pride in. Going back to what Tickle Tiger said a minute ago, by the coaches, know it's time to step up. I kind of think this might be a big year for Tyler Grisham because wide receiver play's falling off. Some of it's due to injury, make no mistake. Maybe a little bit of it's been due to missing on a couple guys on the recruiting trail. Just, maybe the evaluations didn't pan out the way they thought they would. But there has also been a downward trend in the wide receivers' physicality. Again, blocking on the perimeter. They used to take pride in that thing a few years back, and I haven't seen so much of that lately. Lawnmower Man's with us again with so many top programs with new QBs this year. I think will play a crucial role in the playoff. I like Clemson's chances. Yeah, I think there is a clear path for Clemson to the playoff. And anybody that follows me knows I have been sold on Cade Klubnik since the first time I laid eyes on him. I think he is going to be very good. And I feel even better about him now that Clemson's got this new offense installed that he's going to be running. And they've got I think the receivers Clemson brought in 2023 were very underrated. Noble Johnson, Tyler Brown, Ronan Hannafin, even though Hannafin was fairly highly rated by most of the services, or at least a couple of them. But I think Johnson and Brown were severely underrated. I think Brown's going to have an impact on this offense this year. But yeah, back to Klubnik. Kid's just a winner. I think sitting a year, and a lot of fans don't want to hear this, but I think sitting a year probably did him more better than it did harm. Let's put it that way. I think he probably needed the year. He looks like a different dude now. He looks like a different dude physically. He looks like a different dude from his mental aspect. Just staring in his eyes, he looks like a different dude. He's oozing a lot more confidence than he had last year. He's just a gamer, man. I love everything I've heard about Klubnik coming out of camp. If he makes a mistake or throws a pick, man, he just brushes it off and goes right on to the next play. And I think that's something that's hampered the offense in the past couple of years. They've not been able to get over making a mistake, and they let it snowball on them. But yeah, I think Clemson's got a clear path to the playoff. I think they're absolutely a playoff caliber team. I'm just not 100% sold on the fact they're a national title caliber team yet. We'll see when the season gets started. I think they have the potential to be that. And a lot of that's going to ride on something we hadn't even mentioned tonight, the offensive line and how much improvement that's made. And I expect they're going to be better. Make no mistake, I just think they need a lot better before we start talking national championships. Michael says it would be nice to see the offense start to impose their will again. I think that's what Riley is bringing to the table. Yeah, too often over the past few years, we heard, that phrase, taking what the defense gives us. The offense kind of got away from attacking and being aggressive and relied too much on just settling for what they were being given most of the time. Go back to that South Carolina game last year. If you go back and watch that game, particularly in the second half, they were just giving Clemson the passing game, giving it to them because they knew DJ couldn't hit the broadside of a barn that afternoon. And Clemson just kept throwing it and throwing it and throwing it because that's what the defense was giving them. They were, putting 7, 8 guys in the box trying to slow and stop the run. So Clemson was just taking what was given instead of, as you say, imposing their will and running it down their throat. And it cost them that football game. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to seeing this Clemson offense get back to being the aggressor, being proactive instead of reactive. That is something I've been wanting to see for a couple of years now. Bryce says, who do you think will be the most impactful player that is not a starter on both sides of the ball? Most impactful that is not a starter. The first one is easy. Peter Woods on defense. That kid is, I believed all the hype. I seen all the film, heard all the stories, and then I saw him in person a couple weeks ago in practice, and he's just, he is just almost unstoppable. He was just running over guys in the temp. Not, I shouldn't say running over. Man, he was just unblockable during the tempo drill that I watched. The offensive line had their hands full with him, and he was playing against a couple of backups that day. Don't get me wrong. The day that I was there, which he in of himself is going to be probably second string, so 2s on 2s. But he is a guy that I think is going to play early, often, and a lot. He's going to be rotated. He's going to be a guy you see a lot, and I think he's going to have a big impact because I think he's going to be good against the run. I think he can get after the quarterback. I think he's just one of those versatile dudes that you see sometimes on the interior. A lot of people like to compare him to Christian Wilkins, but I think he's more of a Dexter Lawrence. He can eat up space and he can get after the quarterback, and he's so physical. On the offensive side, impactful player that isn't a starter. Give me Tyler Brown, the freshman, because I think he's going to have some chances early too. And people have been raving about him in fall camp. We saw what Antonio Williams did last year, not being an early enrollee, and Tyler Brown's kind of taking a similar path. And Brown's a guy that's got game-changing speed. You can use him in a lot of ways: jet sweeps, little bubble screens, or whatever you want to call them, little pop screens, wide receiver screens. Just get him out in space and let him make plays in the open field, and see if he can pop a big one, because he has got game-changing, game-breaking speed, whatever you want to call it. He's got wheels. So if those are the two I'm going with: Tyler Brown on offense and Peter Woods on defense. Dislike button. Why do you think DJ didn't live up to his full potential? He was supposed to be legendary. That is an excellent question. And I don't think anybody really has the exact answer. He ran a very similar offense in high school to what Clemson was running at the time. Maybe not so reliant on RPOs, but scheme-wise, very similar. So it's not like he was unfamiliar with the scheme or anything like that. And I have listened to the guy in person, break down a defense, like on the spot, bam, 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 bam. And so it's not like you can't read defenses. I think you were dealing with a quarterback that I think it was a lot, most of it, but first year, he's not healthy all year long. I just think he came into last year without a lot of confidence. I think it slowly built up, kind of built up through that Wake Forest game. And he played lights out against Wake Forest, man. He was phenomenal that day. And then, they come back home the next week and play Syracuse, and he's not very good. He throws 3 interceptions. I don't think he ever got over that, man. I think for me, I think it was more about between the ears, not being able to, if you throw a pick, not being able to just go on to the next play and forget about it. Um, and I think he was stuck playing in a stale scheme with all his wide receivers hurt, but behind a offensive line that wasn't great. Um, when he did put the ball on target, a lot of times it was dropped. I mean, it wasn't all DJ. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a big part of it, but it wasn't all him. But for me, I say most of it was between the ears. It is just a confidence thing, and I don't think he was one of those guys that when he made a mistake, he was able to just say screw it, let's go on to the next play. And I don't know, it's just gonna be one of those 5-star guys that just did not work out, man. I am going to be very interested in seeing how the rest of his career plays out at Oregon State, especially he's playing under center a lot now, something he's never done before, and that offense there. I haven't kept up with him a lot. Sound like he did all right in their spring game, maybe. Oh no, in their scrimmage in fall camp the other day, not spring game. Their scrimmage they had in fall camp. Sounds like he performed pretty well in one of those. I will be definitely keeping an eye out to see how his career does there at Oregon State. Good kid, man. It just wasn't meant to be at Clemson. Will XT at 245 be able to hold up a defensive end on the edge, or will he be standing up to rush the quarterback? Hey, I don't think he's going to be standing up. He'll have his hand in the dirt. We'll see if he can hold up. Dude's strong as a bull. What kind of year do you see Cole Turner having? I think he will be used a lot. Kid can play. I remember talking to Cole's high school coach after his senior season in high school. And the coach just raved about him. Cole didn't play. He'd only been playing football a couple years. Started playing his junior year in high school and didn't start playing in a spread offense till his senior year in high school. So they didn't, it wasn't until the senior season that they really started seeing what he could do. I can't remember the coach's name now, but he told me that, not to forget Cole Turner's name. And after his freshman season, the way he was talked up, the way, he performed in the ACC championship game, nobody's forgetting that name, don't get me wrong, but this was before he had ever gotten to Clemson. Because he told me, he said, you're going to know that name in 2 years from now. And I think Cole's a guy that's he's going to see the field a lot. Now, I don't think he's going to be a starter, but I think he's a guy that's going to be in the rotation. And he's another guy that's got some wheels. He can move. He can go up and get the ball. He's shown a propensity to be able to go up and get those 50-50 balls. I think he's a nice, how do I say this? I don't think he's going to be the alpha dog of that group by any stretch, but I think he's going to be one of the key pieces that kind of gets rotated in and out. Who do you feel will take over for Garrett Riley. I only see him staying 3 years tops, probably 2. Yeah, I've made no secret about it. I don't think Garrett Riley's in Clemson for very long. He's got head coaching aspirations. He's gonna have opportunities probably sooner rather than later. I think Kyle Richardson is the next man up. They've got very similar backgrounds. Kyle Richardson ran the air raid while he was, the head coach there at Northwestern when he built a powerhouse there at Northwestern. I think he is the guy being groomed to be the next man up. And if that plays out that way, I think Clemson's offense will be in fine hands. Because I think Kyle Richardson is a very extremely bright offensive mind. John says, I would bet a ton the decision to change at OC was made during the Orange Bowl. I clearly remember post-game Dabo saying basically there will be changes, and I'll leave it at that. Who came later? Yeah, I can't remember that far back, but I think at some point, and it doesn't take long. You got to make a change. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? That's kind of what Clemson was doing on offense. They kept doing the same thing over and over and expecting something different to happen. And at some point, Dabo realizes, hey, we got to do something different. And as much as I like Brandon Streeter, he ain't that guy. If you're gonna change your offense, you got to bring in somebody to bring in a new offense. And unfortunately, it's Brandon Streeter who kind of falls on the sword there. Hey, don't get me wrong. I kind of pointed out about the second half of that South Carolina game, some of the play calling. Play calling wasn't perfect by any stretch. It was very questionable at times. But I mean, it's not like this was Brandon Streeter's offense. Matter of fact, I think they did a lot of things to try to simplify some things before last season, to kind of scale down the playbook that had gotten very thick over the years, with Morris and Elliott and then Streeter. But, I don't think it took long to decide, though. And the question I have is, what does Dabo do if he can't get Garrett Riley? If Garrett Riley says no or has no interest in coming to Clemson, what does he do then? Who gets the call next? Because I don't think Brandon Streeter was coming back regardless. I know some people say that, if he couldn't have gotten Riley, Streeter might still be here. I've heard that said, but I don't buy that one bit. I think that decision was made pretty quick. Can't wait to see the middle of the field being used in this offense. I think you speak for everybody there. We kind of heard last year before the season how they were going to start taking advantage of the middle of the field again. Didn't happen. We heard about it for several years in a row. Just never worked out. I think you're going to see it now, though. I mean, this offense is, you can see a lot of crossing runs. And you're going to see them in the middle of the field finally. Like says, I don't think I've ever been as mad as I was during that South Carolina game. Yeah, watching that thing unfold in that second half, it was just kind of surreal. Matter of fact, I was talking to a big South Carolina fan Friday night, and he was saying the same thing. He just could not believe what he was watching, as far as Clemson and their offense and the way they were calling that game. It was mind blowing. Clemson did everything in their power to kind of hand that game away. It was surreal. I just put it that way. Christian says, I can't wait to see the varies of tempos from Riley in the offense. Yeah, I think they want to be versatile in that regard. Go fast when you want to go fast, slow it down when you need to slow it, slow it down when you need to slow it down. And I think you're going to see them go fast this year, a lot more than they have in recent years. Yeah. Again, something else that got talked about a lot last year was tempo. Didn't see it that much, but again, it's hard to run tempo when you're going 3 and out. If you can't pick up a first down, you can't push the tempo. Period. But I think we're going to see a lot of tempo this year. If you go back and listen to some of the things that Will Putnam said not Will Putnam, one of the offensive line, whichever one it was at the ACC kickoff, Walker Parks, I think it was. What he said at the ACC kickoff, he talked about how much they had worked on getting in shape during the summer to be able to push tempo the way they want to push it. So they know it's coming. They're in shape to do it, and it should be fun to watch. Hearing a lot about Khalil Barnes. Hey, go back to the spring. We've been hearing about Khalil Barnes since spring. He killed it in the spring game. He's a guy I think he's going to be in the rotation too. We'll see how much he gets in on the back end of that defense, but he's a guy that's going to play special teams at least. Make no mistake. High ceiling for that kid. I'm telling you, there was. I talked about the receivers being underrated in the last class. There were several guys in that class I thought were underrated. Khalil Barnes, Shelton Lewis, Rob Billings. There's one more defensive back. Brandon Strozer I thought was a little underrated. There's a few guys in that class that I think were underrated, and so Clemson got a lot of value for some of those guys. Once DJ faced that Georgia D, he heard footsteps. It's his moment to shine, and he couldn't. Yeah, DJ, I don't know that he ever recovered from that game. He took a beating that night. I watched that game from the sideline. He took a beating, man. No, also don't think he was ever healthy after that night for that season either. Went on to suffer a couple more injuries, including a knee injury and a hand injury, if I'm remembering right. But I think he was way more beat up than most on the outside realized. But yeah, I don't think he ever got over that Georgia game. It was Syracuse that got DJ's hand, got stomped on the hand and folded. Watson would have shown some fight. I talked about this earlier today. I go all the way back to that Georgia game, and you kept, or I did. I kept thinking to myself, you're gonna see DJ's gonna flip that switch, man. He's gonna show some fire. He's gonna flip that switch because he's gonna get, we're gonna see some emotion, and it just never happened. Not in that Georgia game, not ever through that 2020 season or 2021 season. Then we finally see the DJ we saw against Notre Dame there in Winston-Salem against Wake Forest, because, man, he just carved those guys up that day. That might have been the best game of his career. And then he comes back the next week, gets his hand stomped on at Syracuse, and there's just no fire, no emotion, no anything. That was the day that I realized there was no switch in there to be flipped. It's just not. That's just not who he is. He's so even keeled and so laid back. It's just not in his DNA. So we kind of was just waiting on something that was never going to happen. John says he's seen some Beaver fans say DJ has showed out this fall. Yeah, I went on the radio in Oregon last week, and I knew they were going to ask me about DJ, so I went and checked out how he had done in fall camp. And tore it up in one of the scrimmages that I read about. Hopefully he finds it out there, man, because he's got the tools, man. He's got the arm. He's got the tools. To me, it's just, it was between the ears. And maybe a change of scenery is what he needed. It was never going to work. He would have never been able to win this fan base back over if he stayed here. Halo, do you think our wide receivers will stand up this year to have them 40s to upper 40s to 13, upper 30s to 10 games? Do I think Clemson has elite wide receivers to win a national championship? I think Clemson has the receivers to be a playoff caliber team, to be good enough to make the playoff. Are they good enough to win a national title? I don't know the answer to that yet. I'm not sure. I think Bo Collins can be as good as he wants to be. And by all accounts, he has been really good in camp. I think Adam Randall is a monster waiting to break out. I think he's got that alpha dog type mentality. A guy that can take over a game when you kind of need a receiver to take over a game late or something. I think Adam Randall is that kind of guy. We all know what you got in Antonio Williams. For me, the key is keeping Randall and Collins healthy, because you got some pieces behind them with Tyler Brown, Noble Johnson, Cole Turner. I guess you get their Brandon Spector in there if he gets healthy. Maybe Roland Hannafin and Team Kelly. But you don't want to have to bring those guys in and have to rely on them to start games before they're ready. You roll them in there and let them be complementary pieces. I think, again, I talked about it earlier, I think Tyler Brown can have a big impact on the offense this season, but I think the other guys need to be complementary pieces and kind of rotate in and out, and you lean on Collins, Randall, Turner, Williams, those four guys, maybe Spector too. I mean, he's got a lot of experience, but to me, it kind of starts and stops with those four guys. I think that first group has the potential to be very good. Again, they just got to stay healthy. Collins has had a bunch of bad luck with injuries. So has Randall his first year. Whether they are good enough to win a national title, I don't know yet. I think it's a possibility. I want to see it. I want to see it on the field before I make that kind of proclamation. No, we just haven't been able to see it yet. Yeah, Turner's still a red shirt. John says Tyson Pumashan has been named the starter at UMass. Not yeah, he's finally getting some playing time, Yeah, good for Tyson, man. Never thought he was the caliber, he was never gonna start at Clemson, let's be honest. He did he did exactly what was best for him. Went somewhere he could start. UMass is a great place for him. Hopefully he'll do well there. Glad to hear he has won that job. Kurt says he would have brought Chad Morris back in. Not sure what he's responding to there, but yeah, I think Chad Morris being brought back is being made to be way more than it is. I just don't think it's that big a deal. He's not going to be there a whole heck of a lot. He's going to help with some film during the week. We'll see if he's there for any games. maybe he's there for one or two. This is, he's not even getting paid. I mean, don't get me wrong, it can't hurt to have him on board. I don't think he's going to come in and have a big hand in offensive game planning or anything. This is going to be Garrett Riley's show. Make no mistake. Any sign Sage Enos is ready to be a part of the passing game, or will Sat be the second go-to pass catcher? You know what? This is an excellent question. We all know Sage Enos is probably the better blocking tight end out of the group. I know Brittany Stools made a lot of progress in that regard. With Brittany Stool being the better pass catching option. But you don't want to have to rotate those guys in and out and start, giving some tendencies away or allowing some defenses to pick up on some tendencies. You want to be able to run the ball and pass the ball with Brittany Stool in there. Be able to run the ball and pass the ball with Enos in there. I think Sage Enos could be one of the biggest benefactors of this change in offense. Because I think I think his ability to block is going to get him some opportunities in the passing game. And I think it's going to depend on what he does with those opportunities. But I think he's going to have some. As we go into the season, I think Enos will probably be that second guy. We'll see if he can hold on to it. Listening to some people, it sounds like maybe he can. Well, we'll see. That's an excellent question. Excellent question. There you go. Somebody corrected me. Putnam was at the AC's kickoff. Parks was the one that talked a couple weeks ago for our last week at fall camp. I don't know why. Sometimes I get those guys confused. What is the latest on Troy Stellato? Clemson was off the weekend. They just started back practice today, so I don't have any update on him. Last I heard, or last anything I heard was maybe he'd be back this week. I would not hold out high hopes on that. Again, it's one of those things I'm gonna have to see. We'll see. I'm gonna have to see it first. It kind of sounds like that's where Dabo Sweeney is too. I'd be interested to know if he was maybe one of those guys that Dabo Sweeney talked about before fall camp started that, wasn't where they wanted him to be at from an accountability standpoint. Not saying he was, I'm just saying I wonder if he was. Because a couple of weeks ago, Dabo made some comments where it kind of sounds like he's a little frustrated with Stellato. And then after the first scrimmage, the Saturday before last, Dabo comes back and talks a little bit more about Stellato and, kind of cleans up some of it. This time doesn't sound quite as frustrated. Talks about how he's had a lot of bad luck. Nobody wants to be out there more than him. And, but to me, anything you get from Stellato is icing on the cake. But I don't think you can go into the season depending on him or counting on him because he is not shown that he is going to be able to be reliable or be relied upon. As Dabo Sweeney always says, that the best ability is availability, and he's just not been available. Tell you what, though, if they can get him healthy and keep him healthy, he adds a whole new dynamic to this thing, man. Because he has got legit 4.4 speed. There is a reason why most of the big boy schools wanted him coming out of high school. Will says it sounds like they had the eye of the tiger back, that killer instinct we haven't seen since 2018. Offense was dull, complacent, got exhausted. He says playoff bound. Yeah, I think there is a new level of confidence surrounding this team right now. And it kind of started with some things Dabo Swinney said back at Clemson Media Day ahead of fall camp. And to me, it's kind of resonated through what some of the players have said. Again, they are talking national championship, man. You just don't ever hear Clemson players talking about national championships the way they have this year. It's just not something we've heard a lot of. And again, I don't think they are doing that if that's not something Dabo Swinney's doing, because they kind of take their cues from him, especially with what they say publicly. It's refreshing. It's refreshing to hear some of the talk. It's refreshing to see, this new confidence level, especially after a couple of years where the offense has just been just bad. Do you think we will have any two-back sets? Yeah, I do think that you will see some two-back sets, but I don't think it's going to be a ton of them. Because if you do that, you have to take a receiver off the field. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I think you're going to see some, but it's not going to something you see them using primarily. An offense with Tyler Brown and Stellato would be dynamic. Yes, it would. It would. That is a lot of speed. I'm not saying Adam Randall has the same kind of speed those guys has, because he doesn't, but he's faster than people think he is. Based off what they saw last year. Got to remember, he was coming back from ACL. I think he was ever fully healthy last year. You never saw him at full speed. Yeah, I have to excuse the dog. Y'all know she's got to get her screen time. Hey, don't forget this Wednesday, 6 o'clock, man, we're going to be out at Alumni Hall doing our big fall preview show. Myself, Zach, Brad will all be on hand. We're going to be giving away all kinds of swag. This is the show we're giving away to sign football. So if you have registered in the past for that thing, this is the one we're doing it. 6 o'clock live, Alumni Hall, Wednesday night. You can do some shopping while you're listening to us. Just go on and on about football. We're going to be making our predictions, our college football playoff predictions, all that good stuff. If you have not subscribed to the channel, we please ask you to do so. Like the video, share them with your friends, all that good stuff. Appreciate everybody who has tuned in each and every week, especially tonight, man. You guys make this thing fun. I have a blast with you guys every Monday night, 7 o'clock. Going to continue on through the season. I know last year we kind of did them hit and miss, but this is going to be a steady thing from now on, every Monday night, 7 o'clock, even as the season gets started. Look forward to doing many more of these with you guys after a lot of wins. Again, don't forget, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and we will see y'all again next Monday night.